Thanks for the intro there, Tim. And thanks, Tim and Paris, for organising this mini-conference. It's now the second time I've talked at it. So I'm Leon. I'm a DevOps engineer for a small ISP in Perth. And I want to talk a bit about the journey behind running an indexing service for a reasonably popular game. So a bit about me, I was hired as a programmer a few years ago. The product I was working on matured and it left me with quite a bit of spare time. So, you know, a decade of sysadmin before programming, that kind of, DevOps is a bit of a natural progression. Anyway, circling back around, last time I spoke on mod archiving, so preserving mods up on archive.org. And this time I want to sort of talk about the infrastructure that we run behind our project. And it was also the project I learned to code on, which was kind of looking like that, but with way more duct tape. Like, I'm talking like just kilometers of duct tape. And like any time a pull request came in, it kind of felt like that. And well, I kind of looked like that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So what is the CCAN? The CCAN is an acronym we may recognize drew some inspiration from somewhere else, but stands for the Comprehensive Kerbal Addon Network, which is a mod manager for a popular rocket science simulation called Kerbal Space Program. And we have somewhere in the realms of maybe 100,000 users. I'm not entirely sure. It's really hard to kind of get the stats without actually, adding awful telemetry to our software. And we track somewhere around 1,500 individual mods and their releases. Now, I think I'm on the left of that graph somewhere. I've never had an actual job at NASA, and I'd say I started playing Kerbal Space Program, but we'll see later how much I've actually played. So some project details. So it sort of came about in 2014, the brainchild of Paul Fenwick, because he really was struggling to manage all the mods he wanted to play the game with and keep them up to date and, releases and all those sort of things. And he doesn't really like doing things by hand. And nor do I, because for me it just meant, not modding games. For him it meant learning C# and writing a mod manager. So one of the primary focuses of the service was to create rich metadata about mods. So and their relationships with each other. And it was sort of like heavily inspired by apt. And on top of that, a reference implementation to the client in the form of a client which consumed that metadata. So my role mostly was automating netcan, which is a tool that takes stub metadata, which is just where to find the mod and a few bits and pieces we want to hard code about that mod if it's not available where we're retrieving that data from, and sort of turns it into something like that, which covers data about it, where to get it, version compatibility with Kerbal Space Program, licenses, who wrote it, what it conflicts with, what it recommends, what it suggests, and other sort of bits of information about the mod. And when I came along, the automation was kind of a Python script which sort of printed shell commands that were piped to bash. It worked, and it was probably written in a hurry, but yeah. I won't say which user it was running as, because, yeah. So I replaced it with a Perl script that wrapped around the netcan tool. But in a rush, moved to AWS, as our infrastructure at the time was kind of being switched off. Yeah, it all went well initially, and I woke up one morning to the most understated reaction to the deletion of half our metadata I've ever seen. Yeah, that wasn't quite my reaction. Fortunately, it's Git, so we just reverted the commit, made some adjustments, and put it back into service. So fast forward to sort of mid last year, we'd sort of rewritten that sort of single, well, I say we, it was me, had rewritten that single script into a full-blown service that spanned many files and did a lot of things, which covered the inflation of the metadata, tracking error status. We had some webhooks for different bits and pieces of automation, some of our support automation for like closing stale support issues, but it would spin up mono thousands of times per indexing run, which is pretty expensive computationally. And also the indexing runs were done in complete batches, so you had to wait 45 minutes if you wanted to make a change to the service. And each of those runs invariably lined up when I wanted to do it. So I'd go to make a deployment, see that it was running, forget, come back a couple hours later, it was running again, rinse, repeat. So, getting changes out the door was really hard. And apart from that, it was just a collection of cron jobs and a small web server sitting on a hand-built Ubuntu box in AWS, which was reaching end of life. Yeah, adding more duct tape. I wish I should have drawn some duct tape on there. That would have been interesting. Probably would have been just duct tape at this point.
What's the name of that array?
I don't know. That's just someone in. I was like, complicated Kerbal satellite was my Google image search, and I went, that looks about right.
Untitled Craft 1.
Yeah, Untitled Craft 1, yep. So there was a lot of code, over 2,000 lines, and I don't know if you've seen that GIF, that CSS GIF of the bear, and you hit its knee and its arm goes up, and that was kind of that was kind of what it was like making changes to the service. But it was well-tested complication. It was just also the tests sort of worked. Some of them worked in Travis and some of them worked locally, but some of them not in both places. And it was kind of also prone to random failure. And I mean, it had another drawback in that I was the only one that understood it. And most of that understanding probably ended somewhere like July, October 2017. So the service had kind of stagnated a little bit, and any PR involved me having to remember how it worked, remember which tests applied where and what environments they needed, fixing the gotchas that I understood when a pull request came in. It's like, if you change that, that's going to break that. Hand building it and hand deploying it. Then fixing whatever it broke in the process. And well, yeah, back to the complicated rocket and me looking scared. Now, it had been reliable for years, but as I mentioned, it was kind of stagnant. And, well, bit of a sad rocket, and you're not going to space today. Like, we would hit these computation, points. So a few more mods would get added, and then it'd use more CPU credits, and then it'd stop, and we wouldn't know why. And a couple of days later, and we're like, oh, we haven't seen a new mod for a while. Go look at the service. Oh, we're cutting off because we've run out of credits. And then you'd get sort of random like Git repo corruption, and I'd have to log into the box and look at it and work out what'd gone wrong this time. So everything kind of depended on me still. There's a lot of me looking scared for quite some time. But there was a solution, and it obviously involved containers. But more seriously, at this point in time, I've had a bit more experience designing services, and I had some new ideas in mind, and I mostly wanted to like decouple everything. I didn't want this one overarching service. I wanted lots of little ones, and so I could reduce some of the complexity and make things sort of like look after themselves when they crash. They just clean their state and start again, no big deal. Also, empower the rest of the team to be able to make changes so that I'm not the only person that understands it. And remove me as the bottleneck to changes. So the new design kind of involved a discrete set of services, mostly the three main ones being the inflator, which instead of being wrapped now runs as a service, so it can just run in memory, listen for new metadata inflation requests, inflate them, send them back for indexing, and the indexer does its job. It tracks whether there's changes and updates the status and stuff like that, and our webhooks. Plus a bunch of like scheduled tasks, like for scheduling indexing runs and cleaning up our cache and the support automation. And it came with a lot of benefits, like changes could be more focused and the logical separation of these services. And in particular, the inflator could cache some of the more expensive operations. As we were already using AWS, there was a lot of inertia to stay. And some of that came from the free tier. You can get a lot of mileage out of the free tier to run a service pretty cheaply. I think we're sitting at around $30 a month, and that is more than half of that is more of our testing infrastructure to make sure that mods, when they come in, actually inflate properly and all the changes work properly. So only half of that spend, maybe less than half of that spend, is the automated indexing service. One of the services we use is SQS, and you get about 1 million requests for free, and we use less than that. DynamoDB, if you're doing a low amount of reads, writes per second, you get up to 25 credits per second for that, and 25 gigs of storage. And I think we're using in the realms of maybe 1 meg of storage in DynamoDB, so I think we've got a bit of room to grow there. We'd have to be tracking a lot of mods for that to be a problem. Plus all the automation tools you get, like ECS and CloudFormation. And, well, it's my day job, so at the end of the day, when I need to make a change, I don't need to think too much, which is always nice. So I'm starting to look a little bit more like Jeb there. I'm smiling a bit more. So things that went really well with this upgrade were the decoupling. Like the main indexing logic was probably 1,000 lines before, and now it was, I think, got it to around about 100 lines of Python. And troubleshooting the services, it's kind of easy. Well, the indexing container's only been up for a few minutes. I guess that one's the one that's broken, rather than looking at it and going, there's one of 15 different things this could be. Which one is it? And which piece of string? Yeah, we go back to that bear. And writing new services, so we've just add more stuff is easy, along with automated deployments and a cost saving of $10 a month to run the service. Now, there's a bunch of things I didn't expect, and one of them was like the huge contributions from the rest of the team, not only in code, but sort of design discussions. Sometimes you get bits, I'd get a bit stuck and I'd go talk to the other team members and they'd have different ideas and different ways to look at the same problem, and also provide a bit of support when I was like tearing my hair out because of some weird Git Python issue that was just making my life a living hell. So I really want to give a big shout out to Habaru-san and Das Skelet, because they were super helpful, super helpful. And they also wrote new features and documentation, which was good, because I'm a little averse to writing documentation, even though I probably should, but I don't know, I forget to do it. So a couple of the new features that they wrote were automatically marking mods that were stale, things that hadn't had a release in a while. We could stop checking them, and that's automatic now. And version handling. So people have opinions on versioning schemes that don't always match up in a way that's easy to track. And sometimes you're like, oh, I'm going to release Christmas mod version number, and then the next version is just version number, and the Christmas mod sorts first, and then you get a lot of people from the community going, I haven't got the latest version of the mod for the new version of Kerbal Space Program. Where is it? And then you're like, oh, okay, we need to handle an exception. So some automation around that, and also versioning mistakes, because not everyone automates their deployments. On top of that, a tenfold efficiency gain of the service. So we're now back to being able to index as fast as we were when we started the project in started the automated indexing in 2015, early 2015. So we might have been tracking a couple of hundred mods, and an indexing run would take about 20 minutes. Now we're tracking close to 1,500, and an indexing run takes 15 minutes. So we've improved, even though the service has exploded in that time. One of our big bottlenecks before was CPU usage because of spinning up mono many times, and also we didn't. One of the things the inflator was doing was calculating the hashes of the downloads every time they checked it every time it was checked in cache. So I was like, oh, have I got it in cache? Calculate the hash. So doing that 1,500 times every run is expensive. So we can cache it now, and that was one of Habaru-san's really cool pull requests. Caching all of that data meant that now we've got other problems that are our bottleneck, like disk I/O from a bug in my code. So we're burning too many disk burst credits. Well, it's not really a bug in my code, it's a bug in Git Python, or the way I'm using Git Python, but that's a slight tangent. And one of the other things I didn't expect to become was more of a code reviewer. So I wrote most of the early parts of the code, but now I don't write so much code as in I review code, suggest changes, and so on and so forth. But there were things I found hard. Learning to harness the team's energy. There was a lot of energy because the service had stagnated for so long, and the other team members were a bit newer to the project, and they had all these ideas and things that they wanted to do. And that was kind of a bit overwhelming. So I'd come to terms with that at some point. And also explaining the design. Running the service for nearly 5 years now, I had an intrinsic knowledge about the different gotchas and the different things that we would encounter. Plus, all of my AWS experience, I kind of know that there are implications in the way you do things. because the other team members mainly work on the client, it's a feature release thing, so features tend to be bigger, whereas the indexing service, being DevOps, is iteration. So all the build process is all automated, it's got automated tests, and when I merge something in, it automatically gets pushed out. Which also means that if something breaks, it automatically gets pushed out and breaks. Which I did a couple times. But you just make a change and push out the new thing and hope that that doesn't break. The other thing I encountered was disagreeing when your team is distributed and we're all in different parts of the day. Sometimes discussions were quite robust and we all have different ways of looking at things. And I kind of had to learn that sometimes it's okay to be wrong. But where now? So we've got a couple of legacy services we kind of need to finish fixing up. Handle the bug in the indexer, which is kind of preventing us from indexing even more frequently, and probably come up with some solutions for the remaining PRs that I've got to review. And probably play some Kerbal Space Program. That is a screenshot I took yesterday. If I had one suggestion, if you really like a game, maybe don't run the indexing service for the mod community behind it. I'll get back to it at some point. So I have some new stats since I talked last time. We've had an increase of index mods of 6,385. 5,887 of those are foss licensed. So Kerbal Space, one of the, I think, requirements for mods from, who makes Kerbal Space Program? I'm having, Squad, take two? Okay, Take Two, well, Squad at the time when it was released, Take Two now, the mods had to have their source code available, which means that it encouraged a lot of open source mods. So 5,887 of those 6,000 odd new mods are foss licensed, which is really cool. We had another 179 new authors, and of the whole author pool, we had an increase of 183 who released foss mods. On top of that, over 6,000 extra mods archived to archive.org. So that covers kind of most of what I have, but I have 5 years of running a service used by gamers under my belt, and I think I've probably got a couple of minutes for some questions that I'd love to answer.
How transferable are the things you've learned while running the CCAN to other games that support mods?
To other games or to
other modding communities?
To other modding communities? I think, well, the client itself has been forked. The CFAN, the Comprehensive Factorio Archive Network, does use our mod manager for their community. There is another service that consumes our metadata and has their own mod manager based on that for Kerbal Space Program. And the whole design initially had the idea that it could be used by any of the other communities. And I'd love to see it used by lots of communities, and would encourage people to approach us and talk to us about doing that, because, it's open source.